All right, folks, welcome back to the Mart Cast here on this incredibly wonderful Sunday, October 6th. This is an unscripted podcast today. I have a few notes that I'm going to jog through, but man, Oklahoma State loses again, this time 38 to 14 to West Virginia. It's their third straight loss. Utah, Kansas State, West Virginia, and it's probably going to be four against BYU and Provo. Um, it's an awful season. It's a really awful season, but it's predictable. And there was a lot of hope coming into this year, and obviously I was semi hopeful, but I had in the back of my mind knowledge of the problems that existed, and they haven't been fixed. This is 5 years running with the same exact issue. Former players talk about it. Current players, believe it or not, talk about it. Um, Everyone knows what the issue is. And I'm gonna kind of go over it. I'm gonna try to be calm, but I'm gonna be honest. it's gonna get this is gonna get fun after a while because at this point I'm kind of tired of repeating the same things, and so many people donate money to this program. It's a publicly funded university, taxpayer dollars, donations, NIL, you name it. I'm a personal donator. Okay, so it's not like these people that are on staff are at a private corporation or something. That's not how this works. Okay, so keep that in mind. There's a few problems, and I want to go over West Virginia first, and then I'm going to go over the underlying issues to those problems. I made a pretty long tweet about all the issues that Oklahoma State had against West Virginia, and I'm just going to briefly go over those and then also expand on it. So, one, incorrect use of Ollie Gordon. This has probably been the most damning problem all season. You have the Doak Walker, a winner, coming back in. You're thinking Heisman hopeful. You return essentially your entire offensive line core and your quarterback and your receivers. So there should be zero problems on offense. You can look at defense and say, well, they still have a semi-young secondary. There's been some gaps in linebackers, injuries, all that type of stuff. Offense has zero excuse. And no, you can say, oh, Ollie Gordon isn't shedding tackles. Ollie Gordon isn't doing what he did last season. I want you to go watch the footage last year versus this, and there's some stark differences, okay? This is a problem that Casey Dunn always falls into as an offensive coordinator, and it's when he has a really good running back, he has no idea what to do with his hands. He panics. Like a 14-year-old calling plays on NCAA 14, he says, you know what, halfback dive. Or if you remember 2006 NCAA football, the best play, Power O. He doesn't know what to do. He runs him straight up the middle, delayed handoffs, and once a game, you'll see him bounce to the outside, and it has high success, but he doesn't do it again. He becomes psychotically one-dimensional, and it's almost painful to watch. They use him in the screen every so often, and then they'll run him to the outside once or twice a game, and that's what works. He's good when he gets into open space. Get him into one-on-one situations with the corner, whatever it may be, instead of running him up the gut with an offensive line that is clearly ill-prepared. And Coach Dickey really has struggled now for years running to protect the running back, to create gaps for the running backs. Our blocking schemes are really bad. One that really starked me was, I believe it was a read option or it was a scuffed handoff. I'm pretty sure it was a read option though, where Alan Bowman draws, okay, on second and goal, whatever it is, and our entire offensive line crashes to the side of Ollie Gordon, and he's left on a one-on-one with a linebacker and gets drilled. Embarrassing. What are we doing? So that's probably one of the biggest problems. Two has got to be the defensive line got no pressure against West Virginia, and this has been a problem now. It was against Kansas State, particularly pretty bad too. And there's excuses here because of injuries. All right, you don't have Colin Oliver, you don't have Nick Martin. It's fine. But what happens when the defensive line gets no pressure is the O-line can push up to the second level, and it forces the linebackers to drop another yard, two or three back into space, and that opens up the short part of the field or runs up the middle, which is what they were completely crushing us on all game. I mean, they averaged nearly 8 yards. Horrible play calling on third and fourth. I'm talking about third and fourth down. This has always been a Dunn problem. Always, 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 always. And it's not going to change because I don't think he understands. I'm just going to be honest. I don't think the guy gets it. All right, third down and eight's running hitches 3 yards underneath. It makes no sense. So many times West Virginia was 8, 10 yards backed up. and we run a little hitch route 4 yards in with 8 yards to go, and then Alan Bowman doesn't know who to throw the ball to because no one's passed the first down sticks. You send one route deep on third downs, one route, and Bowman often forces it, gets an interception. Everyone's like, Bowman sucks. When the reality is the play calling is abysmal. No quarterback would thrive under pressure here, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. It's just inexcusable how bad we are with our third down and situational play calling, which brings to the fourth point, 0 down in awareness. 0. Absolutely none. Third down and 12, let's run a 3-yard hitch route. Second down and 11, forget the run. Let's go 15 plus on a deep post. One run didn't work. Okay, you know what? Let's abandon it the rest of this drive. First down and 10, go for it all or nothing at all. We have 3 downs left anyway. Second and short, surely a screen will catch them. It's just a joke, honestly. It's just an absolute joke. Fifth point, Alan Bowman. Look, I think Alan Bowman's a little bit disrespected, and I understand he's got his problems. He throws on the back foot. He struggles when there's any type of pressure in the pocket. I agree. However, the play calling is not benefiting him anything. We're so predictable. They know when we're passing. They know when we're running, and realistically, I don't know if there's any quarterback in the country that would be able to succeed under this. We need mobility, though, which is why I think Garrett Rangel's the answer moving forward, so long as Zane Flores is not healthy. Little nugget for you guys. So Zane Flores not going to start. So I think Garrett Rangel's the answer moving forward. See how he does. What do we have to lose? Not like we're probably going to make a bowl game anyway. All right, sixth, secondary assignments. Look, this is something I think Nardo has not been that great at, which is a problem because we're running a 3-3-5. You're going to have to rely on your safeties to make a lot of plays in the second level. And Rutgers done a great job fulfilling that gap this year. However, our problem is he's often caught staring down the quarterback or whoever the assigned guy is in the backfield, and someone gets open down the middle or side of the field that would have pinned his assignment. It's been a problem. It was really bad this game, and a part of that is because our linebackers are completely thin, and we weren't getting any pressure to the quarterback, and so our safeties were having to make a bunch of plays at that second level. So that's a problem. It's a Nardo issue. Incorrect use of talent this has and will always be a Dunn issue. Always, without question. This guy stinks at this. He's terrible at this. I will never, there is not, honestly, I'm just going to say it. There's not another offensive coordinator, potentially at the Power 5 level, that utilizes talent more incorrectly than ours, than Casey Dunn. I just don't understand it. The use of Presley is borderline shameful. We're sending him on deep posts so often, and that's just not his potential. Deep posts often need a big guy that can go up and catch the one-on-ones or be big enough to get himself open in space. But no, Presley is a fast, agile, almost running back receiver. There's so many ways to use him in such a successful way that we don't. We don't. I mean, what happened to when we used to do end arounds and jet passes, jet touch passes and things like that? It used to work great with Presley. No. Or look at Rashad Owens. We use him abysmally. He's a 50-50 ball getter, traffic catcher type of guy, and we do not utilize him in that aspect at all. And honestly, the problem is, too, our quarterback couldn't get it to him even if we wanted to. So that is a problem. And then Ollie Gordon, it's a joke how we use Ollie. We talked about it earlier, but it's a joke. It's a joke. And the play calls we call for Bowman, we're not going to his strengths. We don't play into what he is good at. And it's just, it's so bad. He just doesn't know his personnel. He really doesn't. And it's a big problem. And a lot of players talk about this, by the way, former players, about it being an issue. So, man, you think as a wide receiver coach, too, that he would understand that, but he's just good at development, okay? That's what he's good at. He's good at developing guys, but he doesn't know how to use them. Preparation and focus, that's a small one. I'm not really going to get deep into that. And then basically everything else, okay? Our critical game decision-making skills are really bad. Throughout the year, they've been that way. Field goal decisions, going for it on fourth, punting it, whatever. They've all been really bad. Sign of an aging coach, I would argue. You know, our quarterback situation is problematic. Our receivers, I think they're just exhausted of running upfield and nothing happening. And our safeties, the tackling, everything. There is not a bright spot from this game. There's not a single bright spot. And the worst part about it is it almost has absolutely nothing to do with our roster outside of linebacker depth. Almost nothing. We're missing a couple offensive linemen, so there's that as well. Outside of that, there is nothing roster based that this team lacks outside of maybe an elite level quarterback. We have okay options. So it's just mind blowing. But people don't realize how bad Casey Dunn is in comparison to what Oklahoma State has been in the past. Okay, Mike Gundy got exceptionally lucky with Jim Knowles. I'm talking extraordinarily lucky with Jim Knowles. We have not had a defense until Knowles came around, and then we got lucky again, and then we brought in Nardo, and he just hasn't been the answer. So we need that classic Mike Gundy offense again. But the problem is, here's the problem. For years, we've been able to get away with having bad defensive coordinators because we have had one of the best offenses year in and year out in the country. Okay? So we have like 8 top 10 finishes offensively under Mike Gundy in the country. For 5 years, we have been blessed with the best stretch of defense Oklahoma State has ever seen from both a talent and a coordinator perspective. Nardo has basically gone back to what we were defensively, okay? This isn't anything egregious to what Oklahoma State has expected. We got lucky for 4 years being bailed out by, 3 or 4 years being bailed out by good defensive coordinators that shadowed how incredibly awful Casey Dunn has been. I mean terrible. I'm going to get into some statistics with you, but I just want to preface this with statistically Oklahoma State has had a worse offense fundamentally based on a talent level than Iowa over the last 3 years. It is a fact, okay? From about 2020 to 2022, statistically we had a worse offense in many categories, okay? With Dunn, Oklahoma State has averaged 30 points per game with an average rank of the offense in the nation being 53. Mind you, that's with talent like Tylan Wallace, Chuba Hubbard, Ollie Gordon, some of the best receivers and running backs that have ever touched grass in Stillwater, and we are an extremely deep running back crew and receiving crew. I want you to keep that in mind. Some of the best offensive lines we've ever had, best running backs, best receivers, and we've been an average rank of 53. Before Casey Dunn, in the entirety of Mike Gundy's era, that includes the 2005 to 2007 stretch where our offenses were putrid, we averaged 36.5 points per game with an average rank of 24th in the nation. So we have doubled in how bad we are offensively in a 5-year stretch. 5 years. Our worst, this is incredible. I can't even believe I'm about to say this. Our only seasons where our offense was worse than Casey Dunn's literal average of offense, which means he's had significantly worse seasons, at 53. Worse than Dunn's average. We've only had 3 seasons since before Casey Dunn, where our entire offense had a worse national average in points per game than Casey Dunn's entire 5-year tenure. What are we doing? Again, his average rank is 53. We had 3 seasons worse than that in the history of Oklahoma State before Casey Dunn. 56th in 2009, 97th in 2005, which is Mike Gundy's literal first season, and 77th in 2014, where we had a bunch of injuries. What are we doing? What are we doing? 3 years out of 15 versus 5 years of mediocrity. What is he still doing? This is the most inexplainable staff in the history of this program, maybe at the Power 5 level. There's zero accountability. No changes are ever made. We had a week to fix the issues against Kansas State, and we walked out and had worse issues of the same problems a week later. That is a coaching issue. Casey Dunn has been an absolute disaster for us. I just want to, oh my gosh. Let me get into some stats here. All right, let me get into some stats. With West Virginia, Oklahoma State, oh God, had 230 less yards than West Virginia. On 24 passing attempts, we only had 191 yards. Rushing, we had 36 rushing yards, folks. 36 on 21 attempts. That is 1.5 yards per carry. What in the world? You can have a guy, the worst running back, one of the worst running backs in the country at a Power 5 level, and he will average more than 1.7 yards per carry if you give him the right play calls. We don't have the worst running back in Power 5. Far from it. We have the Doak Walker a winner. We have the best running back in college football. Obviously not this season. Returning, and you can't average more than 2 yards per carry. Ollie Gordon had 13 carries for 50 yards. That's 4 yards-ish about per carry. He opened up play looking really good, averaging about 8 yards a carry. He got stopped once on the outside. Once. And we stopped going that direction. We started going down the middle every single time with him. And then the one time we used him outside again was on a screen pass. I just can't even believe it. And he picked up a first down. So, or about 8 yards or something like that. Look, I'm just kind of in disbelief. Truly. This is Mike Gundy interviewed. And I'm going to talk about Nardo now. And I like Nardo as a person. Let me emphasize, I want Nardo to be good. He's actually a really cool guy. And he has good culture. And that's the reason why Mike Gundy hired him. I just want to tell you now, the reason they hired Nardo was because of his culture. And I think was the eventual plan to pass the torch. However, I don't know if that's the case anymore. But I know it was at one point. He talked to defensive coaches in the NFL. Power 5, high-level coaches all across the country. And landed on a Division II coach with a single year of defensive coordinator experience. Single. And brought him into one of the most talented defensive arsenals we've ever had as a team. With Nick Martin and Colin Oliver and Kendall Daniels. And he's just been downright bad. And I like him, and I think he has a lot of potential. He's really good at second-half adjustments. In fact, great at second-half adjustments, I would say. He could be really good down the line. Absolutely. He has high potential. But that's why you don't hire a guy from D3 or D2 with a single year of experience. It takes time. It takes time. He had 0 years as a defensive coordinator before this, guys. He was just a specialty coach for the previous 6 years or something that he coached. It's just a sign of a guy that can't necessarily run a program anymore. I hate to say it. Yeah, I brought up his his experience. From 2004 to 2010, he was an assistant at Ohio. And then 2011, he was the Missouri S&T University special teams and linebacker coach. And from 2012 to 2019, he worked as the linebacker and partial defensive coordinator at Emporia State. In 2020 to 2021, he was the linebacker coach at Youngstown State. And in 22, he was the full-time defensive coordinator at Gannon. I like Nardo, okay? But you're telling me we couldn't have made a better hire if you think that you hadn't. It's so unqualified for a program like Oklahoma State that is a year in and year out potential Big 12 championship contender. Last year's the flukiest, luckiest thing that has ever happened in the history of Oklahoma State. It's so frustrating. Because at what point, there's one of two paths forward. One, we make the proper adjustments. Mike Gundy takes accountability for the problems and makes the tough decision to move on and find better pieces around him. He has really solid deep end staff. I'm talking strength and conditioning coaches, great. We've got excellent support staff all around. Quarterbacks coach, not going to even get into that. Offensive line coach, not even going to get into that either. All the important coaches, we need fundamental change. Linebackers coach can stay, obviously. He's great. Same with defensive line. They can stay. But there's so many things that need to change. And I know Mike Gundy doesn't like to fire people, but brother, it might be time. I'm not saying necessarily you have to fire people, and I'm not going to call for anyone's job, but it might be time. At the absolute least, to have a discussion about getting a new play caller because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, our play call. It's a joke. I mean, this guy makes $1 million a year, guys. $1 million. It's probably pretty dang close to what Zach Robinson is making over at the Falcons. Which brings me to my second point, which is that the second path forward is build the statue, tip the hat for everything this guy has done for our university, which is a lot of amazing things, and move on. You have a guy in the NFL that's already proving himself ready, that played college ball, would understand recruiting, is young, has potential, would stay with the university, waiting. Not necessarily going to be the guy that would take it, but guess what? There's another guy. How about Todd Monken? Said the one place he would come back, he would coach. The one place he would coach that isn't in the NFL is Oklahoma State. All right, you have options. You absolutely have options. So, one, I don't want it to come to that. I love Mike Gundy. I think a lot of people do, okay? He's the heart and soul of our program. But at some point, change has to be had. Change has to be had. And there's one guy that's responsible for making those changes. One, it's the head coach. So it's time. Things need to be done, whether it's changing who's making the play calling, but something significant has to happen offensively. Offensively, because the defense was gassed within 3 drives of the game. It was incredible. With that being said, let's talk about the quarterback situation pretty briefly. Alan Bowman versus Garrett Rangel. I want you guys to really think about this critically, because I know one of the biggest arguments is Garrett Rangel has been given his chance, and that's fine if you believe that, but you're wrong. You're wrong. I know you say he's been given his chances, but you are completely and entirely incorrect. Garrett Rangel has never played a snap of football without the fear of losing his job from one bad play. He just hasn't. He hasn't. The coaches don't believe in him, and it shows. The offensive line is starting to rally around him, just so you know. They're ready for change. Zane Flores obviously would be great, but I told you a little bit of an eggshell. Left you a breadcrumb earlier. Okay. So, Garrett Rangel is the answer moving forward. He has mobility, and he's a lot better than you guys think. He's never been given a proper chance. You try to win the starting job while getting slaughtered against South Alabama with nothing clicking and your offensive coordinator essentially sabotaging you with the play calling. Give it a try. Because you're not going to succeed. Most quarterbacks won't succeed unless they're generational, and I'm not calling Garrett Rangel generational. And obviously, the answer I'd love it to be Zane Flores. So that's something that I just want to emphasize is think about that. And you're trying to win it against a 6th-year quarterback, by the way. Against a transfer that Gundy spent resources on, really wants to be successful. Okay. And the truth is this. There is zero difference if we play Rangel and he sucks, and we play Alan Bowman and he sucks. There's a huge difference if we play Rangel and he proves himself versus playing Bowman and he continues to perform how he has over the last 3 weeks. What is there to lose? Start Rangel and see what happens, man. If he and give him the confidence that we're not going to take your job. Say we're going to give you a few weeks. You've got this, kid. We're not going to take it next week. If you lose this game against BYU, you're fine. We'll give you another shot against Baylor and see what he does. Because I'm telling you, it'll impress a lot of you. So that's my thoughts on quarterback. And Alan Bowman, by the way, awesome guy. I feel bad for him. It didn't work out, but he's had time to figure it out. He's had 7 years of college, so he's had his time to shine. He had a great year last year for what it's worth, I guess. He got to experience a Big 12 championship and beat Oklahoma, and thank you for all that. But it's time to move on to the young guys and see what can happen. And as for Ollie Gordon, man, it's time to not let him play another snap of football at Oklahoma State. I know that's brutal, and I know he probably won't do that, knowing him. But he should ride off to the sunset. I don't want him to get injured. This is just it's become a throwaway season. It's really brutal. There's not really anything that can happen beyond this point. I guess theoretically, Oklahoma State could win out and make like a shock bid to the Big 12 title game, but it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. They're second to last and third to last, tied for last in the conference, and 0-3 in conference play would take a miracle because you'll need Iowa State, Texas Tech, BYU, Colorado, West Virginia, and Kansas State to lose 3 more. Not going to happen, Chief. So anything Big 12 wise is ruled out. You could theoretically finish the year 3-3 or 9-3, excuse me, and have a pretty decent bowl game and upset a couple teams. But your schedule is dog easy from this point on. Besides BYU, you do Baylor, Arizona State, TCU, Tech is hard, and Colorado, which is who knows. All right, we'll see what happens. It's time for change. It's been time for change. I talked about a statistic a couple weeks ago, but I'll kind of go over it one more time just to once again emphasize how incredibly, genuinely bad the Casey Dunn era has been. Oklahoma State, people will look at, oh, well, look at our total yards per game. He's been up there with the country. That's not the problem. It's not the problem. In the Mike Gundy era, Oklahoma State has totaled 400 plus yards of offense and scored 20 points or less 4 other times besides the game against K-State. Okay? Twice were in 2022, and 3 out of 5 were with Casey Dunn as offensive coordinator. To put that in perspective for you, before Casey Dunn, OSU had 400 yards or more in 138 games and averaged 43 points per game nearly. Casey Dunn is in the low 30s to 20s or high 20s if I'm not mistaken. That's a really jarring stat because I think it emphasizes how awful in situational play calling he actually is. When he gets in the red zone, it just everything collapses. He doesn't know what to do. Literally doesn't know what to do. It's either 3 straight passes or 3 straight runs or 3 straight screens. There's no versatility. We've been awful in the red zone. We used to be one of the best red zone teams in the country. I feel like we're probably one of the worst nowadays. So the problem is too, the biggest issue is it's not like it's been a gradual progression upwards. It would be one thing if it's like, okay, first 4 years are kind of brutal. We're getting a little bit better now. It's a gradual progression down. It's not getting better. It's getting worse with more talent. So there's just really, man. And by the way, this guy didn't even want to start Ollie Gordon last year. He didn't like Ollie Gordon. No one even talks about this. No one even talks about it. He didn't want to start Ollie. Ollie won the starting job because we were so awful last season. This is a guy that had 1,800 yards last year and has 380 through freaking 6 games and is averaging 4 a carry. It's just so over. It's so done. I'm at the end. I mean, I'm done with it personally. So it's just about whether the donors are too. All right, boys, that's gonna do it. We're gonna have a college football based podcast coming out later this week, talking about everything. But this is just for Oklahoma State. Not a fun day to be a poke. Not a fun day. Have a good one, folks.